Hi, my name is Poems, and I've just posted this huge new project. It's a Disney-style musical animation, and I had the pleasure to work on the lighting and compositing for this. And for those who are not familiar with these terms, lighting and compositing is a stage where 3D goes from looking like this to this, and there's a lot going on. As a matter of fact, it was quite a rough process. I learned a lot, and I wanted to make this video to share some of the things that I learned and considered, and learn some of the lessons I learned, so that you don't have to go through the same mistakes I did to get to them. So I wanted to start with what's happening here, what's going from this transition. And a pretty good list of objectives we have when we think of what we do when we're lighting. It comes from the blog from Chris Brejon, which is a lighting supervisor, and his blog is golden. I will link it somewhere. It's amazing. And he speaks like when we're lighting, we're trying to direct the viewer's eyes. We're trying to use design to make the areas of the image pop, the areas that we are interested in the audience to look at, enhancing the mood, atmosphere, and drama, which means that we're conveying story. We're conveying what sort of moment on the story, what sort of feeling should we feel. Creating depth, which has to do with understanding the environment, using lights to make a clear read of the space we are on, conveying time of day and season, which is something that is in the script of the film, like scene 30, day, and it doesn't in 3D doesn't come to anything until lighting. Revealing character, personality, and situation, again something to do with storytelling, similar. Complementing composition, and that has to do with lights we can create shapes, and shapes are composition, and of course in layout you place certain objects in certain places in the camera with a certain framing, but with lighting we have also a say in the composition of the scene. So that's something we should keep in mind. Now, this project comes back to an animator, Josep Castaño, who made this Disney-style musical animation, because it turns out you can make a Disney-style music animation without a Disney-style music animation. This is an assignment that he did for anim school, and it's great. Is this animation of this girl that's like freeing herself. She has dreams, and she wants to be big, and she wants to be a star, and it's amazing. It's like an emancipating. It's cool. It's really Disney, as a matter of fact. It's like this I want songs. I don't know. And he said, "Wow, can you turn this? I have a scene which is very blocking modeling. Can you turn this into a Disney style render?" And I said, "Yeah, sure I can." And I wasn't sure that I could, but I mean, I made this. This is the output that I came up with. It isn't perfect. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was happy with it. I mean, it was successful. But it didn't quite look like I wanted it to. It didn't quite look Disney. So what I have done is to try to start this project all over again and make it look like a Disney style film, only using Blender. And this is a story about it. So my first consideration was, well, what does Disney films stand out that mine hasn't? So one quick answer is basically the use of form. You see Disney's always trying to light their characters in a very soft, subtle way that's very appealing, that's very cushy, that's very appealing. And one thing that you can see is how they use gradients a lot. They try to make every surface be extra smooth. The transitions from light to shadow are always super soft and super cushy, and they are super nice. And mine on the other side had some very abrupt, very harsh lines. You can see even the arm that is basically a cylinder. It has like two shapes, and I'm using some design language here. I am referring to shapes when it's something that's flat, and I'm using form when it's something that's 3D. And in 3D, we try to convey everything to have form. So this would be a shape, and this, like some shaded stuff with, I don't know, this would be form. Very basic. And you get the idea. And so Disney has a lot of form, and another thing to consider is how light doesn't really overexpose that much, especially not in the characters. And it was a mistake I did a lot. For example, here the character is greatly overexposed in the arm, in the face even. I have very ugly glows and such. And when getting feedback, another thing that people really found odd is the sun placement. And my answer was, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, there's this room, and she's in a window, and there's the balcony, and the only way I can have the sun lighting is if I put the sun here and I make it light through the balcony to the window, and it just looked weird. And what I learned, actually from analyzing references, is that actually sun position or light record, like light consistency between shots, doesn't matter all that much, at least in the position matter. So case in point, again, Encanto, because it's kind of the style we're looking for. We have this scene where Abuela looks at the sisters and looks at Bruno, and the sisters react. And I want you to look very carefully at the sun position here. At the first glance, the sun comes from directly in front of Abuela, and then once we switch the shot, the sun is suddenly coming from the left. And if we would make a map of this would be like the sisters are here, and Abuela is here, and Bruno is here, and here's the door. And the sun first is coming from here, and then it's coming from here. And it actually makes no sense, but you actually look at it and don't even notice, because since the sun intensity, the sun color is the same, and what's important is that you get a good read of the image, not that the light is consistent. And with this in mind, I try to rethink the whole lighting setup. So I tried to make some renders to figure out what was the best way to light the characters. This was an attempt. You can see here I'm struggling with one thing, and it's that lighting windows is quite hard, because when lighting from a window, you get the cameras in front of the window, and the sun must be in front of the window since it can't be behind. You get the idea, and you get like very very flat lighting, because the sun is really parallel almost to the direction of the camera. And another thing to take into consideration is how I'm trying to get these shadows on the windows from the trees to get some storytelling going. Like, I don't know, she comes from a village and she wants to go to the big city, I don't know. And what I'm trying to do here is just having very sharp shadows that get the patterns of the trees on the window. But a thing that I have is that making a sharp sun actually lights her very sharply, which is something we don't want. As we've said before, we want soft shadows for our rendering, and this is something I didn't know how to overcome. You can see me here doing some tests, but you can see as we soften the sun, then goodbye shadows. Another thing to note, I am using real trees to make the shadows, because they have more natural shadows, since objects that are really close get sharper shadows, and objects that are far away, like the trees that are off camera, they get softer shadows, and it's nice. And other shots, the second shot had like very flat lighting on the first attempt, like everything was lit super uniformly. So what I tried to do is to add more contrast, and at first glance I added too much. This is a roasting of my own work. Yes, I try to use a technique which is called countercharge, where you get the background and make it light on one side of the character, and then this side of the character can be dark, so there's contrast. Then create an area of the character that's light, and then create the other area of the background that is dark. And it usually works, but the thing is that making a light background that's so noisy, has lots of stuff, actually it's very distracting. And also the window, super distracting, lots of contrast here, lots of noise in the image, very bright spots, and I want the viewer's eye to go directly to the character, and it's something I'm not quite getting to with this attempt. And again, third shot, same problem. I'm trying to get like sharper reflections on her, and sharp reflections on the sun don't really work on the character. I'm getting lots of noise. I'm getting lots of shapes. We don't want, especially this shape from the hair is very distracting, and it looks very, very ugly on the character. And we want to, again, softer stuff. Not happy with the results I got. I started again, but this time, I mean, it was final. I started by reevaluating my references. This was the image board I can have gotten to the end. It had like mostly Spider-Verse, because I found this color scheme, like this yellows to oranges to purples to blues to I found it very, 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 very attractive. And also Disney stuff, Pixar stuff, and live action stuff, which is very, very important, because starting from reality and then stylizing helps your work to look very, very believable and grounded, and it's amazing. And now, before showing the final result and speaking a bit about it, I want to make a glossary of terms. I will be speaking of lights, and I want to like establish how are we calling lights. First, there's the environment light, which is a light like in Blender we call it like world lighting, but it's basically the lights that affect like a very diffuse and help like getting the shadows never go to full black. It always has something. Then there's the key light. The key light is the main shaping light, someone in Pixar said. And I find this to be a very, very good definition, because it hasn't always to be the brightest light. It has to be the light that gives the most information about form. And then there's the bounce light, or which basically gives some range on the shadows. It works on the shadow side, and you can see I am establishing also some contrast on the colors. As I had in my reference, I had some warmer highlights and purple shadows, and that's what I'm trying to establish here. Warm key, purple shadows, and rim lights. I want to point out that when we're speaking of key, bounce, rim, this is what most people call a 3-point lighting setup. I think this is a bit an oversimplification, because first I am using various lights. For example, the rims are various lights that are acting as rims. And also because there are other roles that lights play on our characters. Like, for example, a fill light. Fill light is the light that comes sort of from a similar direction from the key, but it helps. It's very soft, and it helps us really sell this gradient effect we were speaking about. And then, last but not least, there's the top light. It's a light that's coming from the top, and it's very natural, because we humans are usually in environments where we are lit by from the top, and sometimes it's artificial, but we want to make 3D look natural, and we often a top light usually helps. And here's the final result. Yay! But first, let's go step by step and speak about it. First shot, the first big challenge, how we get soft characters and sharp shadows. What I ended up doing is just splitting the renders in various layers. That's something you can do, and I always do in my renders, but in this case I use various different lights for each layer. Like, for example, this is the environment layer, which has everything inside the character. The character is only casting shadows, and here's the character. And they have both have the sun, but are different suns. This is a sun that's softer, and since it's the same intensity and the same color as the other sun, it completely sells it, and it looks nice when combined one on top of the other. Another thing I want to point out is how I made the composition for this shot. There's this background that is like a square, like a dark square, and the character is like a bright shape on top of that. So bright over dark creates contrast, and contrast guides the eye to what's interesting, which is the character. And I want to point out that although the background is dark, I try to add lights which maybe come from nowhere but help like selling the separation between the bed and the wardrobe, and giving some detail on the background, which is always kind of nice. What else can I mention about this shot? The trees. The trees I added to get some, again, depth. One of the objectives was to create depth, and I felt it was all in the first term, so it helped to add some trees. But when animated, it felt weird that they weren't moving, so what I did was to just parent the trees to a lattice and move the lattice with a wave modifier. Did the trick. Second shot. The challenge here was the contrast. There was too much contrast in the background and too less and too few on the character. So what I did was first darken the background. The background is super dark. Now the character is always brighter than the background, so that gives contrast. And another thing I did on the left side, the window was too contrasted. I removed all the shadows. Now it's a way softer shape, and I added a volumetric, which is light that irradiates the atmosphere and gives this sort of gradient that eases the transition, and we have less contrast here and more contrast on the character, which is what's interesting. Sharp shapes. Interesting shapes. Nice. And on the left side of the shot, I added a Polaroid wall, which has two objectives. First, it adds some detail, some high frequency detail, which helps selling the idea that this is sort of believable, because reality has lots of detail and 3D usually doesn't. And also it helps me justify, like if here there's light, then I can place a rim light on her that helps me separate her from the background. And on this shot, other things to mention, she is stepping into the light, so as she gets in, she gets more lights, first one coming from below and then a top light that make her look very bright against a dark background, and gives very appealing results and also lots of contrast. I actually like this frame a lot. And last but not least, the third shot. This was a pretty complicated shot because the camera moves a lot, and I had to make sure that everything looked right from every angle. So what I did is, to start, the environment was in shadow. Everything was in shadow, and the character was in shadow, so that wasn't reading quite well. So what I ended up doing is just basically add a volumetric below her, so that the background here is clear, is very light, and then you get the strong silhouette, and everything reads quickly, and it's lovely. And still same idea here, she's dark, background is light thanks to the volumetrics, and it looks cool. It reads visual language. And then it transitions to a scheme where she now suddenly is light and the background is dark. And you get light over dark, contrast. Cool. You're now looking at her. Again, something I want to mention, I am trying always to get like this smooth shading on the character. I'm trying to make everything flow with gradients, everything, like the face, you can see on the forehead, everything should flow with gradients. The arm, even in the shadow, I add some sort of light that wouldn't be there, but I justify it with like having these bright spots sort of allows me to have this arm going from bright to dark and have a gradient. Everything should be gradients, everything. And that's it for the lighting, but there's some compositing on top, just very simple stuff. This is the render with all the layers stacked one on top of each other, and this with compositing. Here I'm basically just putting some glows, grain, lens distortion, which is what makes it look like bulged, which is something that cameras do. We're trying to emulate cameras because cameras are real, and real stuff helps 3D be believable. And we're also adding chromatic aberration, which is this effect that glass in cameras have, that they disperse various light frequencies and you get this color fringing on the hard edges of stuff in the borders of the image. And some grain, because cameras also have grain. And that's it. Here's the final result. If you want to see it with audio and all in 4K and everything, it's in my YouTube channel. You can go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was useful for you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye, thanks!